So we're going to start with social exchange theory. So, social exchange theory really, changed the way I thought about my how I understood my relationships and also just business in general. So I also really think it's just so valuable to understand partnerships and the mentality behind how people negotiate partnerships. So let's get started. So I think social exchange theory is often misunderstood as, I'll scratch your back if you scratch mine. Whereas in reality, I think it's more of an internal subconscious monologue that we have where we ask ourselves, my back needs to be scratched. What am I going to have to do? What am I going to have to give to get it scratched? And will that be worth it? So I know that sounds a bit weird, but let's get a bit further into it. So, an American sociologist, George Homans, he is considered the father of social exchange theory. And his position is that human relationships are formed by the use of an internalized cost-benefit analysis on the part of each individual involved. Further, that people are constantly determining personal benefit from actions, and that behavior is self-directed and an internal process. So this comes back to, what I was saying about this kind of subconscious internal monologue. This is something that happens, it's internalized. It's something so deep in our psyche. We every situation we approach, and particularly ones where we are asked to give something, we are asking ourselves, what will we get from it, and is it worth what I'm going to be giving in return? The formula that we use to do this internalized cost-benefit analysis is what we have here, which is profit equals benefit minus cost. So in this formula, the benefit is what we get out of it, the cost is what we put into it, and the profit is our net gain. So benefit minus cost. So here we've got a situation, keeping in mind this formula, right? We've got a situation between John and Jane. John has approached Jane and said, hey, can you please scratch my back? And Jane has just been asked to give something, right? She's been asked to scratch his back. And you might think, oh, well, that's a favor that you do for anyone. And that's, that might be true. But Jane has found herself in a position where she's giving, and she's finding herself having an internalized cost-benefit analysis moment. So she says, sure, but I need you to take the garbage out tonight. And so at that point, now John is doing this cost-benefit analysis, and he's thinking, all right, is it worth it? How much effort is it really going to take for me to take out the garbage? And he probably says yes. Maybe he's probably really desperate to get his back scratched. But this is a very, I think, a very superficial example. But I just wanted to kind of illustrate, what this is, and how it happens in even some of the most mundane situations. So social exchange theory has, works under these propositions, right? One, that people make rational decisions regarding behavior, right? And further to that those rational decisions are based on a perceived value of net return, on perceptions of net return, right? So people make, in terms of rational decisions, we all know someone who isn't rational, right? But this really more refers to the fact that we make those conscious decisions. We decide to help them if they are willing to give us something in return. Jane decided to say, sure, but you need to take out the garbage tonight. Rational decisions are made on perception of net return. So that means, we think, we enter these situations, we make these decisions because we think we're going to get something out. We think that we are going to come out on top. We think we're going to make a profit in these situations. Or at the very least, break even or not lose. This is why sometimes people don't enter these situations, or don't enter into agreements with people because they think that they're going to end in a loss. So for example, if taking the garbage out meant that you had to grab garbage, put it in your car, and drive for 4 hours to go take it out, then do you think John would say yes to that just in exchange for a simple back scratch? Probably not. He'd be like, what are you talking about? All for 2 seconds that you're going to scratch my back, I'm going to have to spend 4 hours driving to go take out the garbage? No, of course not. So that's a rational decision that he's making on the understanding of what his return is going to be. And his return is not great in that situation. So further, we've got net return is internally calculated on perceived benefit minus perceived cost, which is what we've got here in our formula. And then also that exchange theory operates within cultural norms. So, this interaction between John and Jane, we're in Australia currently. And so this interaction between John and Jane, in my mind doesn't sound too crazy, isn't out there, but this, for example, there are lots of things that, within a culture, like lots of factors that can really kind of change the nature of that interaction. So, for example, think about, age, for example. How old is John in relation to Jane? How old is Jane in relation to John? Is one the elder or the, or the senior of the other? Are they friends? Are they relatives? For example, lots of cultures place a lot of value on family, on helping family. Are they coworkers? There are so many different factors here that can influence this situation. And culture is absolutely one of them. So context really matters in these situations, and social exchange theory definitely recognize that. And like any theory, theories don't explain everything, right? But they can give us a really firm understanding of some of our surroundings and our situations. So moving forward, we're going to just talk really quickly about some examples here. So these are two different partnerships that I've come across here. So first one, this is an email I received from a company called HeyU. HeyU is an app that you can download and use on your mobile phone to order coffee and food. And then they've sent me this email where they're announcing a partnership with a telecommunications provider called Circles Life. So here in this partnership example, we've got the two partners, HeyU, Circles Life. So here, we're excited to announce this partnership. You'll get a $20 HeyU credit and a $10 off of your monthly mobile plan with Circles Life when you sign up. So that's a very telling language. So now we know, so that whole sentence actually is quite telling, because here we know, so we've already identified who the partners are, HeyU, Circles Life. We've identified some of the costs involved as well. So, granted, we don't know exactly which partner's paying for them, but there's a $20 HeyU credit, and let's just assume that HeyU is going to be fronting that money. There's a $10 discount with Circles Life, and let's just assume that Circles is fronting that discount, or they're losing that money. And then we can also see one of the benefits for Circles Life, which is signing up. So the benefit for Circles Life in this instance is new users, is acquiring new users. And then below that, there's some more information on how to get the deal, of course. Well, this is a really good example of how a lot of, kind of SaaS companies and a lot of companies that have large user bases engage in partnerships with other similar companies. So I would, of course, we don't know the exact details of this partnership, but I would presume that this is a partnership where both partners are cross-promoting each other to each other's audiences, presuming that they don't have lots of overlap in their user bases or their audiences, in order to acquire new users, in order to acquire new customers. So it's clear, we know that Circle hopes to acquire new customers in the HeyU database. So I am part of the HeyU subscriber base, right? This email was sent to me. I'm an existing user. And they hope to convert me to a Circles user. So Circles is willing to give a $10 discount in order to acquire a new user. And, whether that yields a profit for them or not, we don't know, because we don't have any insight into what their acquisition costs are, but it is what it is, right? And then in terms of HeyU, so we know that HeyU is fronting $20 HeyU credit, but I'm wondering as well, and I would presume that Circles is probably also sending out a similar email to their user base advertising HeyU and, incentivizing them to sign up in some way. So, listen, you've probably received tons of these emails, to be honest. It wasn't until I started working in partnerships that I really started realizing kind of, what these emails are when you see them. So that's our first one. Our first example. We've got a second one here as well, which is this one I feel is more like a brand example, more of a partnership that was kind of a publicity stunt, probably to gain a bit of a media attention. Let's just go into it. So obviously we've got the two partners here, right? So we've got Johnny Walker, well-established brand, valuable brand, a whiskey manufacturer, effectively. And then, we can see that the bottles themselves are branded heavily with Game of Thrones, with the Game of Thrones franchise, which was a very successful TV series that was on for, 5 or 6 years or so. And this collaboration came out right around, right before the end of the last season. So I think that also kind of plays a part in my assessment, I guess, of what was the purpose of this partnership overall. So, there are some intricacies here. So, for example, number one, we can look at the packaging. I think that they found some synergies and some kind of double entendres that they could play on here. So, for example, there's the kind of the White Walker, which is a character, the villain, if you will, in the Game of Thrones series, and then we've got Johnny Walker, which is the brand name. So there's a bit of both there. There's a bit of synergy, I guess, if you could call it that. And then in addition to that, Johnny Walker, their history of making different Scotch blends or flavors has been to differentiate them by color, by label color. So, there's blue and red and this and that label. And they didn't have a white label, right? So it made a lot of sense, or, it was made very exciting. I was very excited when I saw it, to call a collaboration White Walker, right? And then all of this was launched, I think, as I mentioned, right before the end of the series. So right before the last season of the series. And the media attention was crazy. And so I think that and there was a lot of excitement. It kind of, there was a long wait for the last season of Game of Thrones. And I think this kind of breathed a new life into it, but, kind of reignited that excitement that the fan base, had kind of diminished, I guess, perhaps with time, and reignited everyone into being excited for the season finale again. So, let's talk about the partners here, right? So we've got Johnny Walker, and then we've got Game of Thrones, right? So what are the benefits, costs? Let's talk about Johnny Walker. Johnny Walker already manufactures and, packages and, distributes and sells and all of that kind of stuff, liquor, right? So in terms of their day-to-day operations, it's not super different. I would say that they probably would have spent some money on marketing, probably not too much considering how this spread, so quickly, organically, but nonetheless. And then in addition to that, they probably would have paid, or invested at the very least some resource in terms of making the design for these bottles, and making sure that those designs were up to par with what Game of Thrones brand managers wanted. And then I think in addition to that, I personally don't think that they would have licensed the Game of Thrones name. I think it perhaps would have been more of a revenue sharing situation, but of course, who knows, right? So obviously there are some costs involved there, right? But in terms of the benefit, they would have sold loads of these bottles, right? And then in addition to that, the brand awareness and the media attention alone would have heavily outweighed whatever that initial investment was in terms of designing this bottle, or in terms of even the percentage of their revenue that they had to give up to share it with Game of Thrones. And then on the other side, we've got Game of Thrones. They've already got a very strong brand name. In terms of cost, they, like Johnny Walker, probably would have also invested some human resources into making sure that the packaging was, up to par. They don't have that, any of the costs of manufacturing involved. Perhaps, maybe there's a possibility that they did put some upfront investment into a first batch, for example, just to make sure that Johnny Walker wasn't at a complete loss if it flopped. But, clearly we know now that it didn't. And I mean, they would have, again, the value in the media attention alone and in the buzz it created and the excitement it reignited about the upcoming season of Game of Thrones was huge. It was huge. It was worldwide. So, I mean, this one really stands out to me as a really, cool, exciting partnership that I think was probably exciting for, just as exciting for both partners as it was for everyone else. So that's how social exchange theory, this is why it's important to understand social exchange theory and the effect it can have on, on your potential, on your potential partnerships moving forward, right? It's really imperative that you have a good understanding of the benefit, of the cost that benefit is going to, cost you to obtain, right? And then what you'll have after that. What will your profit be? Otherwise, you could potentially find yourself in partnerships that, leave you at a loss, where your net is at a loss. And really what you should be aiming for is to net a profit. So in our next lesson, we're going to go over how to identify suitable versus unsuitable partners.